Russia didn't simply invade Ukraine, it marketed a story to the world, then marched to war behind it. Denazification, protecting Russian speakers, pushing back NATO. The talking points were polished, repeated, and blasted through state media until they sounded like fact. For a while, they even worked on portions of the global audience. NATO became the headline excuse, the final straw narrative meant to justify risking Russia's economy, military, and future. But none of it was the real reason. Not even close. Those slogans were cover stories, deliberate distractions designed to hide something much more urgent, much more fearful, and much more dangerous. The actual motives behind the invasion have far less to do with Nazis or NATO expansion, and far more to do with existential insecurity, economic decay, and an empire terrified of becoming irrelevant. So today we're cutting through the propaganda. We're going to unpack the real drivers of this war, and the deeper reason Putin is structurally trapped, unable to end it without risking everything. To understand why, we have to go back, far back. 1,000 years ago, a medieval realm rose around what is now Kievan Rus. A network of cities ruled by East Slavic princes, unified by the adoption of Eastern Orthodoxy, and remembered as one of the foundational civilizations of Eastern Europe. For centuries, leaders and historians in both Russia and Ukraine have tried to claim this legacy. But the part that matters is what happened after. Modern Ukrainian identity developed along a long western path, shaped by centuries under Polish and Lithuanian rule. Ukrainian language, culture, and political traditions evolved inside that European orbit. Russia's political ancestry, however, came through a different route, the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which spent centuries under Mongol domination. It absorbed administrative habits and imperial instincts filtered through the Khanate. Less, Kiev's inheritance, more an evolved model of conquest, hierarchy, and control. You can even see this divide reflected in language. Everyday life stayed familiar, basic words like water, tree, and bull remain close. But the vocabulary of power split sharply. In Ukrainian, money is roshi, borrowed through Polish influence. In Russian, it's dengi, tied to Turkic origins. The Russian word for treasury, kazna, traces back through Mongol governance. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian, skarbnitsia, kept older Slavic roots. Even the words people used quietly preserved the memory of who ruled whom, and how. So when Putin insists that Russians and Ukrainians are one people, it isn't nostalgia. It's a political project, an attempt to rewrite identity itself. Because if Ukraine is recognized as separate, historically, culturally, and politically, then Russia's claim to be the natural heir of Kievan Rus becomes weaker. And Putin's empire story loses its anchor. This is why Putin published that infamous July 2021 essay on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians. It wasn't a history lesson. It was a blueprint. He argued Ukraine has no legitimate right to exist as an independent nation, that Ukrainian identity was manufactured by outsiders, and that modern Ukraine is merely a hostile project designed to weaken Russia. Researchers and institutions challenged its claims. Fact checks described it as riddled with distortions and outright falsehoods. But accuracy was never the point. When you're fighting over reality itself, the goal is to flood the space with certainty, not truth. For the Russian ruling class, Ukraine drifting away isn't simply a geopolitical loss. It's existential. One prominent Russian analyst described losing Ukraine as the shattering of Russia's historical heart, breaking the myth of a unified people and a unified Orthodox civilization. Put bluntly, if Ukraine can survive as an independent, successful, west-facing state, it exposes the deeper truth Putin cannot tolerate, that Russia's imperial identity has often been built through conquest, not cultural continuity. And that's only the first layer. Because Putin's fixation on Ukraine isn't just about the past. It's also about Russia's future, and Russia is running out of time. For decades, Russia has behaved like a gas station disguised as a country. Oil and gas revenue has financed the state, propped up social stability, and funded the machinery of power. But the world Russia built its model around is changing, and Russia's main export is aging out of relevance. The global shift away from fossil fuels isn't a slogan anymore. It's policy, investment, and industrial redesign. Europe has openly moved to reduce dependence on Russian energy. The US expanded production and strengthened energy ties with the EU. China is constructing alternative pipelines, routes, and supply networks that reduce Russian leverage over time. Meanwhile, electric vehicles and renewable infrastructure are rewiring what strategic resources mean in the 21st century. Russia never truly diversified. It didn't build a resilient economy designed to survive a post-oil world. It built a state dependent on a shrinking advantage. And that is where Ukraine becomes critical. Ukraine isn't just territory. It's a resource vault. It holds enormous coal deposits, among the largest in Europe, and the overwhelming majority of that coal sits in the Donbas, the exact region Russia has been fixated on since 2014. Ukraine also has major iron ore reserves concentrated in compact, infrastructure-accessible zones, easier to extract than similar resources scattered across Russia's vast distances. But the real prize isn't yesterday's industrial metals. It's tomorrow's. As the world transitions to batteries, renewables, and advanced manufacturing, lithium and rare earth elements become the new strategic fuel. Lithium is the backbone of electric vehicle batteries. Rare earths and specialized metals are essential for electronics, defense systems, and clean energy infrastructure. Ukraine has lithium deposits and a metallurgical base positioned to scale. Russia, by comparison, is weaker in lithium and is burdened with older, less efficient industrial capacity. So the strategic fear is obvious. If Ukraine develops independently with Western capital and EU integration, it becomes more valuable to the future global economy, while Russia becomes less. And the resource story doesn't end there. Ukraine also has major natural gas reserves, with estimates varying widely. Many of the most promising reserves lie in areas Russia has repeatedly targeted, the Donbas region and the Black Sea area. Control of territory isn't symbolic. It translates directly into control of energy potential, extraction rights, and future leverage. This is one of history's most consistent patterns. Wars are often justified by ideology, but driven by incentives. And Ukraine sits at the intersection of economic survival and strategic relevance. But there's another pressure pushing Putin toward desperation, a quieter crisis with enormous consequences. Russia is running out of Russians. After the late Soviet period, Russia's fertility rate collapsed hard through the chaos of the 1990s. A generation gap formed. Fewer births then means fewer young adults now, which means fewer families now, which means fewer births next. It's a negative feedback loop that compounds over time. Russia could have eased this through immigration. Instead, Putin's system constrained it, prioritizing an ethnically and culturally narrow vision of Russia. In effect, the state traded demographic stability for ideological purity. And in that context, Ukraine looks different through Moscow's eyes. Before the full-scale invasion, Ukraine had tens of millions of people, largely culturally and linguistically close enough to be seen as absorbable inside Putin's worldview. It's also far denser than Russia, more people, closer together, inside productive land and infrastructure. From the imperial perspective, conquering Ukraine wouldn't just be conquest, it would be an infusion, labor force, conscription pool, and demographic reinforcement. If the original plan had worked, a rapid decapitation of the Ukrainian government and a quick annexation, Russia could have swallowed a huge population in weeks, not decades. Even with Ukraine's own demographic challenges, the structure of Ukraine's society and economy offered something Russia increasingly lacks: potential momentum. But even that isn't the whole picture. Because there's a third actor shaping this war's logic, and it might be the most important one of all. China. Russia likes to present itself as a sovereign great power, choosing its own destiny. In reality, the war has accelerated a trend that was already underway, Russia drifting into the role of a junior partner, or worse, a client, inside China's economic orbit. After 2014, Western sanctions pushed Russia to reroute trade. China became the lifeline, but at a cost. Russia began selling energy at discounts and deepening dependence in ways that reduced leverage over time. Trade volumes surged, but that doesn't mean equality. China doesn't need Russia as a peer. China benefits from Russia as a supplier, a resource appendage feeding Chinese industry with cheap inputs. And here Ukraine becomes crucial again, not just for Moscow, but for Beijing. China's long-term strategy requires secure access to energy and, even more importantly, the raw materials of the green transition: lithium, rare earths, industrial metals. If Russia controls Ukraine's resource-rich regions, China gains indirect access through its influence over Moscow. If Ukraine stays independent and integrates with the West, that resource future becomes harder for China to shape. That's why certain peace scenarios are so revealing. Deals that freeze the lines and allow Russia to keep occupied territory aren't just about ending the shooting, they lock in resource control. And for China, resource control is the only language that matters. For Putin, this creates a brutal logic trap. If Russia loses in Ukraine, it becomes increasingly dependent on China with less to offer besides discounted energy. But if Russia secures resource-rich Ukrainian territory, it regains bargaining chips, something to trade, something to leverage, something to keep the relationship from becoming pure submission. Yet even these practical motives, history, resources, demographics, Chinese pressure, sit on top of something deeper: imperial identity. Russia has been shaped by empire for centuries. From the expansion under Peter the Great to the Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, the state repeatedly defined greatness through control of neighbors. The post-1991 era, when Russia was not expanding, wasn't treated as a new normal. It was treated as an insult, a temporary humiliation that demanded correction. Putin is a product of that worldview. KGB training, Soviet nostalgia, and a belief that Russia confined to its present borders is a diminished Russia. That's why the pattern repeats: Georgia in 2008, frozen conflicts that block NATO integration, leverage through instability, the same playbook across multiple regions. But Ukraine is different. Ukraine isn't just another former Soviet republic. In Putin's imagination, it is the core prize, the proof that the empire can be rebuilt. If Ukraine is conquered, the imperial myth survives. If Ukraine escapes permanently, the myth collapses. That is why Putin framed the invasion in World War II language. Not because he was fighting Nazis, but because he was trying to borrow the moral authority of 1945 for a modern project of domination. He was fighting for the right to claim Russia still dictates reality in its neighborhood. Ukraine refused. The country Putin called artificial, unified. Russian-speaking Ukrainians didn't welcome invasion, many fought it. The assumptions of quick victory, Western hesitation, and Ukrainian collapse shattered. And that leads to the darkest truth: Putin cannot simply end this war. After years of fighting, enormous casualties, sanctions, isolation, and a state economy warped around military spending, Putin has tied his legitimacy to victory. Ending the war without a meaningful win would expose catastrophic failure, not only to the public, but to his inner circle, the security elites and power networks who profit from the regime and demand strength. There's also the economic lock-in. A war economy creates beneficiaries: defense contractors, factories, military salaries, regions sustained by state spending. If the war stops abruptly, the system risks a crash, and millions of people who currently benefit could become angry. The longer the war continues, the more the state becomes dependent on the war continuing. Even the negotiation posture reveals the intent. Proposals that demand Ukraine cede territory and disarm while Russia keeps what it took are structured to be rejected. Each rejection becomes propaganda fuel. They don't want peace, followed by justification to continue fighting. And above all, Putin believes time favors Russia, that Russia can grind down Ukraine through attrition and outlast Western support. But the mathematics of attritional conquest are horrific. At current tempos, full conquest would take an absurd amount of time and would consume generations, not only Ukrainian lives, but Russian lives as well, potentially at a scale that would hollow out the state itself. Yet for an imperial system driven by myth and survival panic, even that can look acceptable, because the alternative, admitting failure, threatens the regime. So the real motives behind this war aren't about Nazis or NATO. They're about history, controlling the narrative of identity and legitimacy resources, replacing a dying fossil fuel model with future critical minerals and energy demographics, feeding a population crisis with conquest China, avoiding total dependency by acquiring bargaining leverage empire, proving Russia can still dominate neighbors. Ultimately, the invasion was born from desperation, a declining imperial project led by an aging ruler who believed conquest could solve structural collapse. And that's why this war isn't just about territory. It's about whether the Russian imperial idea can survive reality.